Let's go back in time. Picture the misty hills of 15th century Tuscany. In a little town called Vinci, surrounded by olive groves, a child is born who is going to change, well, pretty much everything. But here's the thing. His story doesn't start in some grand palace or fancy university. Nope, it begins with a mystery, and a path so unconventional it would forge the mind of a true master. And it all boils down to one powerful idea.
This sentence right here, this is the key to unlocking everything about Leonardo. It was his personal motto, the driving force behind his entire life. He truly believed that real knowledge didn't come from old books or the kind of formal schooling he never really had. It came from getting out there, looking at the world with your own two eyes and learning from it firsthand.
Okay, so let's dive right into the central puzzle of Leonardo's life, his birth. How on earth did a boy born out of wedlock, an outsider by any measure, become the absolute icon of the Renaissance? Well, the answer is kind of surprising. As we're about to see, his unconventional beginning wasn't a handicap at all. It was actually his greatest advantage.
Now, what's really wild when you look at this timeline is just how fast his parents' lives went in totally different directions. The very same year he was born, his father, who was a successful legal professional, married a woman from a good family. And then, the next year, his mother married a local craftsman nicknamed Acatabriga, which, fun fact, means the troublemaker. So right from infancy, Leonardo was on a completely separate track from either of his parents' new families. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell, share and like our videos. The information in the video is compiled from open sources. Thank you.
Now, you might think being illegitimate in Renaissance Italy would be this huge scandal, right? But it wasn't really what we'd imagine. I mean, his baptism was a big public deal with 10 godparents. The historian Jacob Burckhardt even called this time a golden age for bastards because it was so common, even among princes and popes. This social acceptance was absolutely crucial. It gave Leonardo a place in the world, but without all the rigid expectations that would have completely defined his future otherwise.
So while we know he was illegitimate, the story of his mother, Caterina, is one of history's great unsolved mysteries. For hundreds of years, we knew almost nothing about her. And even today, scholars are still going back and forth trying to figure out who she really was.
For almost 500 years, this was it. This was all the world knew. A single mention in a tax record of a Caterina married to a Catabriga. Her story was just gone, wiped from the history books. That is, until modern research dug up two pretty startling and totally conflicting possibilities. So you have these two competing theories. On one side, championed by historian Martin Kemp, the belief is that she was Caterina di Meo Lippi, a poor orphaned peasant girl from right there in the Vinci area. But then, a totally different story emerged when scholar Carlo Vecchi found a legal document. It showed Leonardo's own father freeing an enslaved woman from the Caucasus, named Caterina, just months after Leonardo was born. It just goes to show you, even with one of the most famous people in history, there are still some huge questions we just can't answer for sure. And get this number, 17. That's how many half-siblings Leonardo eventually had from his father's 4 marriages and his mother's 1. But he was way older and barely had any contact with them. He was, for all intents and purposes, raised like an only child, completely separate from the huge, bustling families his parents went on to create. So this really unusual upbringing did more than just keep him separate from his family. It put him directly in the care of his first, and you could argue his most important, teacher, nature itself. Leonardo actually called himself an Omo Sanza Lettere, a man without letters. He didn't have the formal classical education that all his peers had. He couldn't read the great works of Plato or Aristotle in the original Latin or Greek. But here's the brilliant part. He turned this supposed weakness into his greatest strength. It totally freed him to trust what he could see with his own eyes, instead of what some ancient authority wrote in a book. He chose experience over dogma, every single time. This quote from his notebooks just captures his whole mindset perfectly. He's talking about a childhood memory of finding a dark cave, and he describes being torn between fear of the unknown and this powerful desire to see what was inside. And with Leonardo, desire always won. That unstoppable curiosity was the engine that powered his genius. So what kind of lessons did he actually find out there in those Tuscan hills? With no professors or textbooks to guide him, what secrets did the world itself whisper to him to shape that incredible mind?
The world around his hometown of Vinci was literally his curriculum. He'd study rock formations and find fossils up in the mountains, basically becoming a pioneer in geology. The olive groves taught him about botany, which led him to his famous rule of trees about how branches grow. And he was completely obsessed with the flow of water, a fascination that stuck with him his whole life. He even saw the earth itself as a giant living body, with rivers as its veins and mountains as its bones.
And this is where it all clicks into place. This is the crucial point where all those threads, his illegitimacy, his mysterious mom, his education in nature, they weren't disadvantages at all. They were the very things that gave him the freedom to become Leonardo da Vinci.
It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? But his status as an outsider was probably the single greatest stroke of luck in his entire life. It was the key that unlocked him from a predetermined life, freeing him to go out and create a destiny that was entirely his own.
I mean, just look at this comparison for a second. If he had been a legitimate son, he absolutely would have been expected to become a notary, just like his father, his grandfather, and 3 generations before that. His whole life would have been spent poring over legal documents written in Latin. Instead, his circumstances set him free to follow his real passions, observing, drawing, and inventing, guided by nothing but his own incredible curiosity.
So how did this self-taught, illegitimate kid from the countryside actually become the master we all know today? What was that final step?
Well, when he was about 14, his father finally recognized his son's off-the-charts talent and got him an apprenticeship in Florence with Andrea del Verrocchio, who was one of the top artists around. And this is where his raw, nature-taught talent got polished with professional technique. The results? Well, they were immediate. By age 20, he was a certified master, and just 1 year later, he created his first known masterpiece, a drawing of the Arno Valley, a beautiful callback to the landscapes that were his very first teacher. So, when you lay it all out, the recipe for this kind of once-in-a-millennium genius becomes crystal clear. You needed him to be born an outsider, totally free from expectations. You needed his education to come from nature, not just from books. You needed a hands-on apprenticeship to give all that raw talent some structure. And when you put all that together, you get a mind that was free to invent like no one before or since.
Which leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. If things had been different, if he'd been born a legitimate son, destined for a predictable, stable career, would we even know the name Leonardo da Vinci today? It's just a powerful reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary paths begin in the most unlikely of places.